Hello guys, this is Akshay over here and welcome to my another video on discussion for KCET and NEET preparation. This is basically a continuation of body fluids and circulation chapter. So let us begin then. So the human circulatory system, the main organ of the human circulatory system is actually the heart. And heart is actually mesodermally derived organ. And as you can see in this particular diagram that heart is placed in between the two lungs and slightly it is tilted towards the left side. And when you look into the size of the heart, it is the size of the clenched fist of your left hand. And heart is actually covered by a double membrane structure called as the pericardium. And the space between the pericardium and the heart is filled by a fluid called as the pericardial fluid, which actually protects the heart from any kind of mechanical shock. So now, if you look into the heart when completely cut open, you can clearly see that the heart is made up of mainly four chambers. The human heart is mainly made up of four chambers, that is two auricles and the two ventricles. Both the auricles are separated by a septum called as the intra-auricular septum, and also both the ventricles are separated from each other by interventricular septum. Okay, and also you can see that the entry of blood from the auricles to the ventricles is guarded by a special kind of valves. In the case of right auricle to the right ventricle, there is a valve called as tricuspid valve. But whereas from left auricle to the left ventricle, there is a valve called as the mitral valve or also bicuspid valve. So now the respective ventricles lead into the pulmonary artery and also the aorta. The opening of aorta and also the pulmonary arteries are guarded by special kind of valves called as the semilunar valve. So the purpose or intention of these valves is that they just basically prevent the backflow of the blood. Now, you can also see that heart is having its own specialized conduction system. Okay, what I'm trying to refer here is the ability that heart has itself to contract. Right. So this system is actually called as the conduction system. So conduction system is basically made up of special kind of muscle fibers that generate the action potentials, and this generation of action potentials will result in contraction of auricles and ventricles. So here you can see that the most important, the first conduction system here you find is the sinoatrial node, or also called as the SAN, right? From the SAN, sinoatrial node, which is mainly present on the wall of the right atrium. And next, you also find one more specialized muscle called as the atrioventricular node, which is present slightly below than the SAN. And from the atrioventricular node, there is this structure called as the bundle of His. The bundle of His splits into left and right bundle, and these left and right bundle reaches to the apex of the heart, and from the apex of the heart they again branch out to the ventricular muscles, and these spread part is called as the Purkinje fibers. So here you can see that the sinoatrial node uh, conducts or generates an action potential for about 70 to 75 per minute. Standard value what we consider is 72 per minute. So now let us look into the cardiac cycle, which is the most important part of the whole chapter. So here there are some important terms that you people have to remember. The first is called as the diastole, which means the relaxed state, and another one is the systole, which means the contracted state. So if I use the term auricular diastole, it means that the auricles are relaxed. If I use the term auricular systole, it means auricles are in contracted state. The same things are applicable for even ventricles. So now let us begin the cardiac cycle with all four chambers being in diastole stage, that is in the relaxed stage. So as all the four chambers are completely in relaxed condition, the blood directly flows into the respective auricles, that is the right auricle and also the left auricle. And now when all the four chambers are relaxed condition, that is in the diastole condition, the semilunar valves are actually closed, but whereas the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are actually open. So what happens is that as the blood is flowing into the auricles, they directly move into the ventricles. They directly move into the ventricles. From auricles, they move into the respective ventricles. So at this particular moment, you can see that the sinoatrial node over here now generates an action potential. This action potential results in a contraction of the auricles. As the auricles contract, the remaining 30% of the blood which is present in the auricles is forcefully pushed into the ventricles. So now, at this particular moment, the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are closed and the pressures inside the ventricles starts to rise. Meanwhile, the action potential from the SAN, that is sinoatrial node, reaches to the AVN, and from AVN it travels to the bundle of His, and from bundle of His travels through the left and right bundle and spreads through the Purkinje fibers, and as a result there is contraction of ventricles. So when the ventricles contract, the only way the blood that has to flow through is through the pulmonary artery and aorta, because the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are actually closed. So the blood is forcefully pushed into the pulmonary artery and the aorta, and as the pressure inside the ventricles start to decrease, you can see that the semilunar valves now close down and the tricuspid and bicuspid valve again open, and again the blood starts to move into the auricles, and from the auricles the blood moves into the ventricles, and this particular cycle goes on, right? So remember, this is the most important concept of the whole chapter. So what is the duration of the cardiac cycle? The cardiac cycle duration is around 0.8 second, right? So what we are trying to say here is that the SIN, that is the sinoatrial node, generates an action potential for every 0.8 second. Hence, the cardiac cycle duration is around 0.8 second. So now, what is the amount of blood that ventricles actually pump during the ventricular systole? It is around 70 ml of blood, right? So now when you multiply the stroke volume to the number of heartbeats, you will get the cardiac output, and 70 multiplied by 72, you get 5 liters or 5000 ml. So now we can look into the ECG, that is electrocardiogram. So ECG is mainly a device which is mainly used to monitor the proper functioning of heart or not. So here you can see that the device is actually having electrical leads, and the monitor starts to give a characteristic curve, that what you're looking here on the screen. Okay, so here you can see that this is called as the P wave, and next this one whole thing is referred as the QRS complex, and finally you can see the T wave. So what does the P wave actually mean? The P wave means that atrial depolarization, right? Or in other words, auricular systole or contraction of the auricles. And now the QRS complex mainly refers to the ventricular depolarization or contraction of ventricles or ventricular systole. And finally, we can see that the T wave mainly means the ventricular repolarization or ventricular diastole or relaxation of ventricles. But nowhere you are seeing atrial repolarization or auricular diastole. It is mainly because the ventricular depolarization actually masks atrial repolarization or atrial diastole, right? What does it actually mean is that the repolarization of auricles coincides with the ventricular depolarization. Hence, it is not visible in the graph. So now let us look into the next part, that is the double circulation. So now what is double circulation? It means that blood actually enters the heart two times. So here you find two type of circulatory method, two type of circulatory pathway, that is the systemic pathway and the pulmonary pathway. So let us look into the first one, that is the pulmonary pathway, where the deoxygenated blood from the veins enter into the right auricle, and from right auricle to the right ventricle, and from right ventricle it is pumped into the pulmonary artery and goes to the lungs for oxygenation work, right? So this particular pathway, what we discussed now, from right auricle to right ventricle and from right ventricle to the pulmonary artery, so this particular pathway is called as the pulmonary circulation, right? Now, from the lungs, after purification or after oxygenation, the blood comes back to the heart by pulmonary vein into the left auricle, from the left auricle to the left ventricle, and from left ventricle, it is pumped into the aorta, and from aorta it is transported to the different parts of the body to deliver the oxygen and nutrients. So this circulatory pattern is called as the systemic circulation. So this two type of circulatory pathway is called as double circulation. So here you can also see a cross section of vein and also cross section of artery. From the diagram itself, it is very much clear that the smooth muscle layer in the case of artery is more thick than the smooth muscle layer in the case of vein. As a result, the arteries are more elastic in nature and they can withstand the pressure and they don't burst. Hence, they are also more stretchable when compared with the veins. And finally, you can see that capillary. So they are mainly a single cell thick, and the cells of the capillaries are mainly called as the endothelium. So now let us look into the regulation of cardiac activity. So as we have said that human heart is mainly myogenic, that is, it can generate its own action potentials and it can beat by itself, it can contract and relax by itself. But however, the speed and pace at which the heart contracts is again regulated by the nervous system. Okay, and here it is the autonomous nervous system that mainly controls the cardiac activity. Specifically, we are speaking of sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves, right? So now the sympathetic nerves that actually innervate the heart muscles can increase the heartbeat rate and contraction strength of the ventricles and thereby increasing the cardiac output. Okay, but whereas the parasympathetic nerves decrease the heartbeat rate and also decrease the cardiac output by controlling or by decreasing the contraction strength of the ventricles. This is mainly achieved by special hormones called as the catecholamines, that is an epinephrine and norepinephrine. So finally, we will look into the disorders of circulatory system. The first disorder is the hypertension. So now the normal blood pressure should be around 120 bar 80. 120 is the systolic pressure and 80 is the diastolic pressure. But however, if the blood pressure increases more than 140 bar 90, then it is referred as hypertension and it can have some adverse consequences on the brain and kidney. Now we are having another disease called as the coronary artery disease or also called as the atherosclerosis. So here the blood vessels that are mainly supplying the heart is affected, which we refer it as the coronary artery. Remember, the coronary arteries are the ones that supply the blood to the heart, and it is mainly because of deposition of cholesterol and calcium in the coronary arteries. And next we are having is the angina or angina pectoris. So the one major symptom of angina is that there is an acute chest pain, and it is mainly because angina is mainly because not enough oxygen is supplied to the heart muscles. And finally, we are having is the heart failure or congestive heart failure. It is mainly heart is not pumping the blood effectively. So do not confuse the heart failure with the heart attack, where the muscles of the heart are actually damaged because of improper supply of blood. Or also one more is the cardiac arrest, inability of heartbeat. So this completes the chapter body fluids and circulation. So if you found this particular tutorial very much helpful for you, then please do like the video and share it among your friends, and finally subscribe to this particular channel. And more importantly, if you're having any views, you people can share it in the comment section. Thank you.